Hey you guys, it's Brock here. So we've got a really interesting interview here. What I first want to talk about is a lot of people know that I went from $0 to $6 million selling products through private label. But what a lot of people don't know is I've actually made money many other ways, and private label was the last way. Drop shipping and retail arbitrage. And then I went into wholesale. And then I finally went into private label. And there's some other ways I've made money too. But this one is going to be about wholesale. So we have an interview with Larry, and Larry's awesome. He's gone from he went from like 50,000 to $18 million in sales in 4 years. And he's an awesome guy. He's working really hard. He's built something really cool. I met him, first saw him on Instagram, so go check him out. His name is Watch Me Amazon on Instagram, and go check out my Instagram too. Come on, give it some love. But he's got way more love than me. He's got like 33,000 followers or something. But yeah, he's on YouTube too, but not too much. But he's got a really cool story, and so I'd like to share that story with you guys today. So we're going to go over some things such as, what have we got here? I got ADHD. I can't remember what we actually talk about. So in this video, we're just going to talk a little bit about kind of the stats and what he's looking for and how he actually got started in building his $18 million empire. And then we're going to go over some more stats. We're going to cut this up into a couple interviews, but this would be more so how he runs his business and what he looks for. And then we'll get into the deeper things later on. But he's a great guy. I've met him in person. We were actually just together a couple weeks ago at Gary Vaynerchuk's the Twitch party there. So yeah, we both talked to Gary, and he's doing awesome stuff. And I think I'm going to go to his warehouse and actually go show you guys kind of what it looks like to run a wholesale operation. And I've actually done quite a bit of wholesale myself. I've done over $1 million in wholesale. You probably didn't know that, but now you do. So wholesale, very different business model. You get to learn a little bit about what it's like here. Hope you guys enjoy this interview, and watch out for the next ones coming out with him. For YouTube replay in the future, I'd like everybody to meet Larry. Don't know your last name. I just know you as Watch Me Amazon, mainly. What, you've been going hardcore on Instagram, just hustling for what? How long you been on there?
I've been on Instagram now for, I would say, a little over a year, maybe like a year and a few months.
So how long have you been doing private label for, or not private label, how long have you been doing wholesale for? Has you been documenting the whole journey, or has you got to a certain point and you're like, yeah, I think people would be interested in this?
So I only started documenting when I got on Instagram about, a year and a couple of months ago, a little less than a year and a half ago. But I've been actually selling wholesale since late 2012 when I first got into Amazon.
Oh, 2012. So do you think that people, okay, so it was back then, it was easier in 2012. What was it like back then? I hear stories. I didn't get in until what, 20 well, I was selling in 2015, retail arb and stuff, but private label was 2017 for me.
It was like the wild, wild west, man. So many less sellers than there are right now. So many less restrictions. So much less brand gating. Just the wild, wild west, and basically, the ability to print money.
So how much did you get started with?
So in 2012, when I started working, I actually didn't start my own business. I was working for someone else who had a Amazon US business. And at the time, they were scaling out and they were looking to expand internationally and start an Amazon UK business. And the guy that I was working for, he was like, listen, I'll make you a partner. I'll give you a, split of the profits. I want to start an Amazon UK business. Here's, what I'd like to do. You run everything. You figure it out. You run the whole business. I'll give you a third of the profits. And that's how I started in Amazon UK. I worked with him for about 2 years. And then in 2014 was when I left and started my own business.
Okay, so you got started in 2014. Was it still pretty wild, wild west then, just like 2012, or was it kind of there's getting more difficult or whatnot?
I think Amazon is a business that always gets more difficult and more competition and more sellers and more rules and more regulations. Like next year is going to be a little more difficult than this year, and the year after that's going to be a little more difficult than next year. So it was always better than it is right now. And 2014, it was still the wild, wild west, especially on the European side of things.
Oh, I didn't even know they had European back then. So, from what I've heard, I personally have not gone into the European markets yet. I'm looking to do that soon, but yeah. So, I mean, it's still very easy comparatively to the U.S. market, from what I've heard. So, I can't even imagine what it was like back then.
Yeah, back then it was nuts, but USA back then was nuts too. Right now it's probably like a step behind in terms of competition. But the UK is always, catching up to the US market.
So, do you like I don't know if I've ever known, but like, do you have like a general like size of how big your operation has grown to these days?
In terms of sales.
Yeah, yeah.
So last year, my goal was to do 20 million in gross sales, and we were shy of that by a little bit. We did just about 18 million in gross sales. This year, hopefully, we'll break that 20 million mark. Hopefully, we had a couple of setbacks, so hopefully, we'll get to that goal. And last year was about 13 million.
Oh, okay. So about a 50, no, not 50, 40% growth?
Yep.
50? Oh, yeah. Do you think that you could still like start a wholesale business like
Yeah,
today? Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely.
I asked because I was actually going to after I just had a giant cash infusion of 3 million in cash from the eclipse. I was like,
Absolutely.
I should get a warehouse and do this. But then I just started it, and I was like, that's a commitment. Like getting a warehouse, employees, and tying up all your cash flow. And
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one thing that people shouldn't take for granted is like any real business, you definitely have to put in some work, and you're not going to get to those kind of numbers overnight, and it's definitely a building process. But for people who are willing to put in the work, it might take you 6 months or even a year before you decide to pay yourself, because you're going to take all your profits and you're going to keep reinvesting it in inventory. But definitely very viable still to start a wholesale business.
so, do you like? I guess like, what do you attribute your ability to grow? So, like, is it your negotiating skills, getting suppliers, or is it just like literally just it's at the point where you just put in the work, do the process, and it's not like it takes anything like very unique to
Yeah,
or kind of like going that.
it doesn't, it's not really anything unique. Like, I mean, I don't have some secret sauce, proprietary type of, trick up my sleeve that no one else knows. It's like, like I said again, like starting any real business, it's willing to put in the work, to put in the hours. And then it's just a combination of everything, getting the processes right, negotiating, putting a team together, and just doing a little bit of everything the right way. But more so than anything, is the ability to work hard and put in the hours, same as if you started a real, like, brick and mortar business, for example.
Okay, so let's take me back to the early days when that 2014 when you like expanded out and you started your own thing. What did it look like?
So in 2014, like I said, in 2012 I started working for someone else. Everything was going, great and swimmingly. And then for whatever reason, the person that I worked with kind of tried to jerk me, for lack of a better term. And we had a falling out, and, I didn't want to, but I left to go do my own thing. When I left to go do my own thing, I had spent most of my money. I had just gotten married at the end of 2013, the year before. So I wasn't in a I didn't have a lot of cash to start a wholesale business, and starting and scaling a wholesale business definitely requires some cash. Excuse me. So I was looking for an investor, and one of my closest friends at the time, I had all the knowledge. I knew suppliers. I knew what to buy. I knew how to grow the business. I knew, exactly what I would do with the capital. I just didn't have as much capital as I would like to start a business. So one of my close childhood friends, he decided to invest $60,000
Oh,
into the
wow.
business. Me. We split everything 50-50 right down the middle. And we took that 60,000, and I think we bought right around $50,000 worth of inventory. The other 10,000 was, for supplies, for shipping, for office space, all of that. And, the 50,000 that we spent on inventory was research inventory, stuff that I knew would sell, stuff that I knew would turn a profit. It got to Amazon, 2 weeks goes by, we get a deposit, money comes into our account, we reinvest it, we buy some more inventory. 2 weeks later, we get another deposit, still from that original 50. We take it, we reinvest it, we buy some more inventory. And we just started spinning that money, that initial 50,000. Every deposit we would get, we would put it back into the business, we would replenish, we would buy new SKUs, we would just keep growing and growing and growing and snowballing it. And I think probably 7 to 8 months, we didn't pay ourselves a dollar, because when money comes, into your account from Amazon, there's a decision to make. Hey, do I want to take money out of the business, or do I want to reinvest it into the business and buy new merchandise? That's how the business scales. So we kept just reinvesting it, spinning our loot. And yeah, we just grew that to the business that we have today.
Wow.
Wow.
So,
So
like when you were starting, did you have a specific kind of rule for your margins? Like when you were getting in those beginning days versus, kind of where you're at now, or like what was your criteria like for knowing? I mean, I have a pretty good feeling, but for just the other people who are watching this who are newer, it's like, okay, he got a $60,000 investment and then just started buying stuff. Like that scares the heck out of people, you know?
Yeah, so here's the thing. The reason why I spent 50 grand on inventory was because I had, and it's not 50 grand on one item. I think it was 50 grand spread out like through 100 different SKUs. And these are SKUs that were researched, that I knew were ranked well. I knew they would sell. I knew we would make money on it. So if you're starting, I knew what to buy with that 50 grand. I had these SKUs lined up. If you're getting into the business and you're just starting, you might only find one product, two products, five products, 10 products. So you don't go and throw 50 grand at three products. You start with what you have. I just had a list of stuff to buy. So it just so happened I had 50 grand worth of stuff to buy. But to answer your question, the margins that I was working on then, and it's kind of the same thing that I'm doing now, pardon, is in the UK, we would stick to only things that make 40% ROI. And in the US, we would stick to things that only made 30% ROI. And I think when your capital is limited, you should only, if you have a limited amount of money to spend, you should buy stuff that gives you a higher return on your investment. And as you scale and as you have more cash flow, like if you have like unlimited funding, then you can buy things that make 20%, 15%, 10%. It really, doesn't matter if you're buying stuff that makes 5%, if you have like just unlimited funding to fund it all. But if you have limited capital, that's what I was starting with: 40% in Europe, 30% in the US.
Okay.
Okay.
And then, what do you want for a turnover rate now? For the amount of inventory you want, like how many times you want that to turn over a year?
So I would say probably our inventory turns over 4 to 6. So it's like on a case by case basis, but it's based on sales rank. I would say our inventory turns over anywhere from 30 days to probably 90 days.
Okay.
So in the US, depending on the category, but for most categories, I like to stay under like 35 to 40,000 in terms of BSR. And in the UK, I like to stay under like 25,000 BSR.
Here's one thing I've always wondered about it. Like, let's say I want to, you get the rights to sell a brand, correct? And then now, does that come with the right to like sell that with another brand?
So 99% of the stuff that you're selling, you don't have the brand's blessing to sell it. You're not
Okay.
they're not telling you don't sell it. And there's three types of scenarios out there. There is either brands don't let you sell and they're gated and they're going to complain if you list their products. Then literally like 90% of the business out there is products that you can list that the brands don't complain about, that everyone is selling, and it's fine to sell it, but you just don't have to approach the brand and ask them for permission. If you probably did, they would say no, but it's kind of like a don't ask, don't sell policy. And then there are definitely certain, brands and certain scenarios where they let us list, we're authorized sellers, and all kinds of, all that good stuff. And, that's definitely good. But I would say 80 to 90% of the stuff we're selling, we don't have like express written approval from the brand that we can sell it. But these are brands that are not complaining and just kind of have like a don't ask, don't tell. People are selling their stuff on Amazon and it's no big deal.
Oh, okay. Because yeah, I had issues in the past because I did I don't know if you know, I did retail arbitrage for my first 2 years, and actually right when I graduated college, I had like $100, and Radio Shack went out of business. So I ended up going to over 400 Radio Shacks around the nation, and just buying all their stuff, you know, like planning out when they were going to go on sale, the biggest percentage, and just, you know, tripling my money and built up that way. And then I was actually doing wholesale through Radio Shack, and it was their CEO was writing off on my purchase orders, but it was never had written consent. And then all of a sudden one day the chairman of the board like sends me an email saying he's going to sue me. I'm like, what?
You were selling Radio Shack branded products?
Yeah, like I was buying them wholesale from them. They're shipping them to my house, and the CEO was like writing off on the purchase orders.
I mean, that's just par for the course. I mean, usually
they'll just flip on you at one point.
Yeah, you can have a brand, you know, even you can have a brand that knows you're selling, that lets you sell, and everything is going good for 6 months, a year, 2 years, whatever the case is, and then, you know, one day they just change their mind. Sorry, can't sell it. You're done, and just got to move on and, you know, take the loss and go on to the next thing.
Yeah, that's what I had ddone, and I had just sent him an email back, and I was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry," and you know, I love the Radio Shack brand and all this stuff. And then they actually, then we had talks, and it almost came to the point where I was going to be their director, like manage their entire Amazon account for them, and help them with their Shopify store too. And then actually started potentially do a YouTube channel with them, and like making a bunch of electronic stuff. Yeah, so it's crazy. They're just all over the place, and then they went bankrupt again. So that was no more.